G'day and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to do a long-term review of the very popular Canon RF200-800 lens for wildlife photography. I'm going to cover the undeniable strengths of the lens, but many of the weaknesses. Now, I've had extensive experience with this lens since I purchased it nearly 2 years ago. But in today's video, I've reached out to you, all the owners of this lens, to submit their favorite images and tell me what the pros and cons are. So by the end of this video, you're going to get my opinion and the opinion of many of you. All right, so let's start with the positive. And the first thing that pops into my mind, and the main reason I enjoy using this lens, is the versatility of the reach. To have 200 millimeters, then all the way to 800 millimeters in one lens. I don't think there's any other full frame lens that can do this natively without teleconverters. So it's just that flexibility to shoot wide and then make that subject much bigger that just makes this lens so attractive. And it's probably the main reason why people buy this is for that 800 millimeters. And you can see in this viewfinder footage, and from 200 millimeters, you can see I zoom into 800. It makes massive difference. What this lens does, it gives people the ability to make that subject large without having to get closer. It just means you can stand there, zoom out to 800 millimeters, and that subject instantly becomes much bigger in your viewfinder. And that's ultimately what a lot of people are going for. They've used shorter lenses, they crop a lot, and they think I need a longer focal length. And that's what this lens has in absolute spades. And out of interest, some of you might be wondering, well, how often do you use the shorter focal lengths? Like, do we even need 200 to 600, or are you shooting at 800 mil the majority of the time? And this will differ for each one of us, but I had a look at my Lightroom catalog, over 70,000 images on there, and I was surprised to see that I only shoot at 800 millimeters about 54% of the time. I thought it would be much higher, but it sort of shows me that I do use those other focal lengths, which is good to know. It means that I'm getting the most out of that 200 to 799 millimeter range. I think it'd be fun just to have a look at some photos at different focal lengths to sort of show you what's possible. First, at 200 millimeters, I had a grass tree growing in my front yard. I had honeyeaters coming to visit and they were flying off. So I wanted to capture a flight shot of this honeyeater. At 200 millimeters, I could get the sun, the grass tree, and the birds. And that's exactly what I did, which resulted in this photo, which I'm very happy with. But what's important to know, I think, if I was at 300 millimeters plus, I think those birds would have been just too big and I wouldn't have got them all in the frame. So having the ability to go wider often allows you to include more habitat. So always remember to zoom out a little bit, include more, and this lens definitely allows me to do that. So the next range is that 400 to 600 millimeter range, and this is quite a good range to do bird and flight or start at, because then you can pick up the birds in the viewfinder and maybe zoom out a little bit as they fly past. But I had a session with some welcome swallows, so I'm in that sort of 500 millimeter range. I'm tracking them as they fly past. Surprisingly, the camera, the R5 Mark II, picked them up pretty well, and we got this shot. Again, very happy with the level of detail, and this was captured at 500 millimeters. I just love the reflection in this and everything about it. You can definitely shoot bird and flight with this lens. So the next shot is of a crake, and I think I started at 800 millimeters with this because it's a little bit further away. But as it's walked towards me, I've wanted to include more space just in case we got a reflection. So I've zoomed out to, I think, 670 millimeters. And we got this incredible reflection shot, and the ability for me to zoom in and out and change my composition is sort of why I love zoom lenses, and this image definitely showcases that. And then lastly, of course, if that subject's a little bit far away and we want maximum reach, we can zoom out to 800 millimeters. I was at a pond and I'm firing away at some birds, and then I noticed to my left there was a kingfisher which was right on the edge of the pond. It was a little bit far away, but I sort of slowly turned around, 800 mil, looked through the viewfinder, focused on it, snapped away, and we got this detailed shot of a sacred kingfisher. And I just love the light in this. I like this sort of habitat inclusion, and the detail is fantastic, mainly because we're able to get out to that 800 mil. So you can see in those 4 images, you've got complete creative control, and it just gives you so much versatility and flexibility that without a doubt, that is the biggest advantage of this lens and the reason that I love using it. And someone who highlighted this was Bartolome. He submitted 2 images to me of a chamois in the mountains of Slovakia. He's obviously hiking. He's come across, he's seen it on a mountain. He's taken this first shot, which is quite wide. We can see it up on the mountain there. And then he's decided to get creative and he's zoomed out to 800 mil. He's obviously focusing it up on the hill. He's taken some shots and he's actually created this black and white image which I think is really powerful. And I much prefer this image to the first one. It's just really interesting to see that silhouette. And obviously the lens gave him the ability to do that, just to make that subject much bigger, get creative. Awesome shot. Thanks for submitting that one. So the second major advantage to this lens, say over a prime, is its minimum focus distance. At 800 millimeters, this is 3.3 meters. This lens here, the 800 f11, is 6 meters. It means a subject can come much closer to this lens, which is going to result in a much bigger subject in your viewfinder. I know one of the downsides to this is when subjects do come close, you can't focus on it, and it's extremely annoying to miss shots due to your lens not focusing. I was with a good friend. He was shooting with the Nikon 800 PF. That has a minimum focus distance of 5 meters. We're laying side by side and we had this crake coming towards us, and it kept coming and it kept coming, and it came within that 5 meters and he could no longer focus on that subject. However, as you zoom out on this lens, your minimum focus distance gets shorter and shorter. And I came all the way to 200 millimeters, which is 0.8, and I was able to focus on this crake, capturing this shot, and you can see the detail at 200 millimeters is superb in my opinion, a wonderful shot. And I would have missed this if I'd been shooting with the prime. So it's just that versatility again to zoom and the minimum focus distance, which is a big bonus of this lens. And someone who took advantage of this was Alexander. When he took this portrait of a red-eyed vireo, the detail captured is excellent, and it has a little bonus of some food in its bill. Just incredible detail really. As I mentioned, I think 800 millimeters is what people love about this lens. It's because you get to see the detail of subjects that you can't see with your naked eye. You take a photo, you look through the viewfinder, and you just get this buzz or this adrenaline. And someone that happened to was Connor. His very first session with this lens, he's gone to a local lake. There was a grebe. The grebe was fishing. He's taken this shot of a grebe with a fish. He's looked at it and he was just absolutely blown away by the detail. And I can imagine how you felt when you took that, because it is a buzz. You're like, wow, this is incredible. You're seeing things that you normally wouldn't see. And that's why people gravitate towards these longer lenses, is just to get detail like that. Ultimately with 800 millimeters, it just means you don't have to get quite as close to the subject as you would with, say, a 100 to 400 lens. If you're shooting with a 100 to 400, it often just feels way too short. And I've got a comparison here. And here's an image of a pipit taken at 400 millimeters. And you can see we've got the stump, we've got the birds quite small, we've got the gate, and you would have to crop quite heavily on that if you wanted that bird much bigger. If we zoom to 800 millimeters, that subject becomes way bigger. We've got the out of focus background, the detail on the bird's great. So you can see the difference between 400 and 800 is quite substantial. So if you are using a 400 millimeter lens and you're struggling to get that subject big, well, this lens kind of solves that for you. So someone who utilized that reach was Scott. He captured this beautiful short-eared owl without having to get too close. And I just love the overall feeling of the image. The frost on the branch, the warm light, the inclusion of the habitat. These are the sorts of images that I go out in the field to capture, and I'm glad Scott shared that one because it's an absolute beauty. The next strength of the lens, for me at least, is that I can handhold this in the field. I don't have to use a tripod or a monopod, so I can handhold this pretty much all day. Yes, my arms will fatigue and I need to take a rest, but I can't do that, say, with my 500, etc. Now that will vary depending on your strength. How much does this weigh? Well, the lens itself weighs around 2 kilos, but as you know, I like to talk about working weight. So I weighed this with obviously the lens foot, the lens hood, the camera, which is an R5, the memory card, and the battery. All up, this weighed 2.9 kilos, which is quite heavy. However, it's actually lighter than this kit here, which is the Sony A7 IV 200-600. So this is actually lighter than this by about 100 grams. So if you've ever used a 600mm lens like a Sigma or a Tamron or something like that, this will weigh almost identical. So if you can handle that, you'll more than likely handle this. And a lot of people mention that they do like it for that reason, is that yes, it's big and it is slightly heavy, but it's manageable. So they can go for a walk, they can go for a hike, they can take it with them, and when they need that reach, they have it available. So someone who actually did a hike was Tim. He took this lens into the Rocky Mountains in Colorado and he spotted a mountain goat. He was able to capture this shot, which I really like due to the inclusion of the foreground, the background elements. The pose is just, I'm sure you got a buzz when you took that. because that's what I would be wanting, and well worth hiking up a mountain with it. I would say though, if you've never held one of these lenses, like you've never owned one of these heavier 600s, I would go to a camera store and ask if you can hold one with a camera attached and just get a feel for it, because you know, the last thing you want is to buy this lens and then discover that it's just way too heavy for you in the field. So definitely be aware of the weight. Somebody else who was just wandering around photographing what they saw was Noel. He was following a kestrel when he spotted movement to his left. The sun was coming down. He's obviously just whipped the camera around. He's seen some pheasants. He's focused on it. He's rattled it off, and he's managed to capture this absolutely glorious shot of two pheasants fighting. The light is sensational. The action, everything about it is just, well, I would have liked to have taken it. So Noel was absolutely stoked to capture it, and I can see why. And that's just one of those beauties of being able to walk around with lenses. We never know what's going to happen. See something like that, take a photo. Awesome. Another benefit of a kit that you can handhold is when you're sort of going after shorebirds or going to areas where you need to move around a little bit. It's a lot harder with heavy gear to sort of track subjects and move over rocks and things like that. And somebody who did navigate the rocks and get an amazing shot was Will. He was crawling around some rocks when he saw a lesser yellow legs. He's waited for the waves to come crashing in, forcing the water up. He's focused on the bird, and just what awesome action. You know, this is what I'm talking about, is capturing something unique, something different, something interesting. And this definitely sparks my attention, and just a cracking image that, again, I would have loved to have taken. So the next shot, again, was opportunistic. Dr. Ranjatham spotted a golden-fronted leaf bird taking a bath. It's just jumped up onto a branch. He happened to be there. He's focused on the bird, taken this shot. I just love the color in this, the dynamic movement, the water, just, oh, I don't know, it just creates an interesting image, and I'm sure all of us would have loved to have been there with him and taken a similar image. So if you've watched this channel, I'm always talking about moving left, moving right, up and down, and someone who really demonstrated this well was Phil. He observed a bald eagle on a dead branch, and he thought that was a little bit boring. How do I make this more interesting? He's walked around and he's managed to get foliage all the way around the subject, taken a photo, and in my opinion, this is just a much stronger image because it's just more interesting. And I'm glad that you did that, Phil, and I highly encourage all of you out there just to always be moving around, trying to change your composition, because you'll end up with a shot like this that's improved on his first shot. The next strength of the lens is actually a very good one, is the image stabilization. Being 800mm means that you will struggle more to get sharp shots, but because the image stabilization is so good, we can handhold this at low shutter speeds and still get sharp photos. Somebody who demonstrated this was Levi. He was out and he spotted an ibex, and he photographed this at 1/60th of a second, which is pretty remarkable. Now, Levi did say, overall, I'm very happy with this lens in particular. I like the fact that it provides such a long focal length while still being light enough to take on hikes and long nature walks. So thanks for submitting that image, Levi. And I did actually do some tests myself at really slow shutter speeds. I had a couple of butterflies that weren't going to move, so I thought, right, I'll go all the way down to 1/40th of a second, which is pretty slow for such a lens, and I rattled off some shots, and we got this very sharp of a pair of red spotted Jezebels. I actually quite like this image, and because I shot at such slow shutter speeds, obviously my ISO was lower and resulted in this detail, which I'm very happy with. Now, in terms of the sharpness and the quality throughout the range, I think Jeff said it best. He said, I really like the RF200-800. It's my primary wildlife lens. The zoom range is amazing, and although not prime sharp, it's good enough sharp. I like that term, good enough sharp. And he said that he believes it's the sharpest between sort of 500 and 700mm. He shared this wonderful image of a bunting, and I just love the inclusion of the habitat, the bird's inquisitive pose, the color of the bird really pops with the greens and the blue, and the image was shot at 707mm, and it's just very, very sharp. And I tend to agree with Jeff that I think sort of that 200 to 750 is its sharpest. And another image just to showcase this was a wood duck by Adrian. You can see in this good light at this focal length, that is more than sharp enough. I have no issues with the image quality that's coming out of the lens. Now, another image taken at 800mm is this beautiful double-eyed fig parrot by Scott. These birds are absolutely beautiful. He's got one better than me. I haven't photographed this species yet, so I'd love to. It's such a stunning little bird, and obviously the lens at 800mm allowed him to capture that. I think it's pretty clear from all the images I've shown and all the images I'm about to show is that if you do buy this lens, you can take sharp images. Are they prime sharp? No, but they're sharp enough. And another image which highlights that is this wonderfully sharp detail image of a short-eared owl by Jason. When we zoom in, this is just kind of remarkable, to be honest. And I just absolutely love the inquisitive nature of the owl, the detail. I'm not sure what more you could ask, to be honest, from a lens that costs this amount of money. And speaking of the price, I think the reason this lens is so popular is that it retailed in the US, I think, for $18.99 upon release, making it one of the cheaper 600mm lenses. Unfortunately, the price has gone up by $200 in the US since release. It's around 2,900 Australian. Do I think that's a fair price? Yes, I do. It's around equivalent of other 600mm lenses from Sony and Nikon, etc. So that's sort of its price bracket, and you are getting that very versatile lens. And so Landon actually emailed me with exactly that. He said, the lens is amazing, especially at this price point. The sharpness is incredible, and the weather sealing is surprisingly good. He shared this shot of a prairie dog, which is nice and sharp, and he was very happy with that. He did have a couple of negative things, which I'll mention later on, but overall he's very happy with the lens. So I do get asked a lot about the autofocus, and it's quite hard to definitively say one lens is better than another. Anecdotally, I do get quite a few soft shots using this combo. I'm not saying the autofocus is terrible, it's just for some reason on takeoffs and a few flight shots a few times, the lens has struggled for me. I'm not sure if that's a light issue or what it is, but overall, I still think your L series lenses are going to have better autofocus. In saying that, for me to get sharp shots of swallows in flight is a very difficult thing to do, and this lens did provide me with a lot of sharp images. So in the right scenario and circumstances, it still performs extremely well. And somebody who highlighted this was Joe. He shared this absolutely incredible image of a European stone shat taking off. I've shared this before. One of my most favorite images with this lens. I love the darkness, I love the light coming through the wings. It's just a very, very pleasing image. And obviously the lens has tracked that subject and it's very sharp. And the next shot by 80 of this kingfisher leaving the water, the lens has obviously picked it up. We've got all those water droplets. Again, this is a fantastic image and I just absolutely love the action. So the autofocus has obviously worked well in this scenario. And another action shot which made me laugh was this failed landing of an osprey by Phil. He was focusing on the osprey as it came into land. It's landed on this perch and then the perch is snapped and the bird started falling. Because he was shooting at a high frame rate, I think on the R6 II, he's managed to capture that exact moment, the bird's dropping, and I absolutely love this image. And the autofocus has tracked it well in this scenario. So as you can see, plenty of people have had a lot of success in terms of the autofocus. And the last positive thing I want to mention before we move on to the weaknesses is just the fun factor. For me, this lens is a lot of fun. Like I carry this in the car almost with me all the time. It's sitting in the passenger seat. If I see something, like I had those kangaroos in the fog, I'm just out the window taking some photos or jump out of the truck, then keep traveling around. It's just that ability to have a kit that you can pick up, shoot, put it down. It means you're going to capture shots that you might not have before. And so for me, I've had a lot of fun with this lens. I'm going to continue using it. So that for me is a measure of success. I definitely have no regrets purchasing this. There are going to be some weaknesses I'm going to talk about, and those are slightly disappointing. But overall, I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with this lens. And just before I jump into the weaknesses, I haven't actually mentioned it. Some of you are probably going, what do you have on this lens? And it's just a 3M sticker covering. I did a video showing how you apply it. You can definitely use like lens coats and different things. You don't even have to have that. It's more just for scratch protection than anything else. So if you're curious about that, you can check that video out. All right, so it's time to talk about the weaknesses, and there's quite a few. And what's interesting is nearly every single person who owns this lens has the very same weaknesses. So it's disappointing that Canon have released the lens when nearly every user has the same complaints. I would have much preferred if they had addressed those complaints before manufacturing it, but it is what it is. This is the lens we have. And I think what Canon said to their engineers is, we want the lightest lens possible for $2,000 that has 800mm. And this is what they've come up with. They've made a few design choices which are a bit head scratching, and let's go through them. Let's talk about the first major weakness, and everybody complains about this, and it's the size of the lens foot. As you can see, it's absolutely huge, and the downside is you can't remove it. Unlike the 100-500, you can remove the lens foot off that, which I have because I shoot handheld the majority of the time. It just means you've got excess weight that we shouldn't really have to be carrying around. Canon, you should have let us remove it. The next thing is there's no Arca Swiss built in. So if you are going to use a tripod or a monopod, you will need an additional plate. to attach to this lens foot and use it. It's just annoying. They shouldn't have done that. So that's one major thing. The next major omission is there is no focus limiter on this lens. What do I mean? So on just about every lens, say you're doing bird and flight, and you don't want the lens focusing through the entire range from minimum focus distance to infinity. So what most lenses do is give you the option to actually choose different focus distances. This one here is obviously full, and then we go 3 meters to infinity. So why Canon didn't give us a focus limiter on this lens is a head scratcher, and it's annoyed me a few times because when I'm photographing bird and flight or something like that, I don't want the full range. They could have easily overcome that, and they should be doing what other brands are now doing, is allow us to set the focus limit in the body itself. So many brands now let you, let's say you're doing bird and flight and you go, well, I only need 6 meters. You go into the body, you set it, and then the lens won't focus between 3 meters and 6 meters, which is just makes sense, and hopefully they give it to us in a firmware update or in the new bodies, but we need some way to set a focus limit if you're not going to give it to us on the lens. And the next design choice, which I'm not a big fan of, is it is an external zoom, meaning obviously that we have a barrel, and when we extend it, it becomes a much longer lens. I understand why they did this. It's to reduce the weight, and it's just to make it much smaller when you're shooting at 200 millimeters, and there's less moving parts, which means it's cheaper to produce. So that's why we have an external zoom. But the downsides of an external zoom are it just takes forever to go from 200 to 800. It's very hard when you're shooting in the field. 1, 2, it's almost 3 turns, to be honest, if you're doing bird and flight. And I noticed that you just struggle to go from 500 to 800 quickly when birds are flying past. And with extended use, you get a very sore wrist and a very sore thumb. And my lens, for whatever reason, has remained quite stiff. It's probably loosened a little bit, but it's still quite an effort to turn this. Now that varies. I know some people have a much smoother lens, but mine, for whatever reason, is quite stiff. And it's just annoying, to be honest. It just reduces your fun. If you get an internal zoom like the Sony, it's an absolute dream. There we go. There's just no comparison. 400, 600, 400, 600. Just means when you're shooting, it's just like this. You're just changing your focal length so quickly. It's just a dream to use these internal zooms. So for me, I much prefer an internal zoom over an external zoom. So that's one major downside. And the other thing a lot of people have unfortunately discovered is there is a weak point in this lens, and it's where the barrel attaches to the other part of the lens. This has a tendency, if you drop it or if you put pressure on it, to snap in half. And you can see in this photo sent to me by Bianca, she had this lens in her camera bag on a plane. I believe she's pulled it over the overhead locker, and then it's dropped a very short distance onto the floor of the plane. She's opened the bag and the lens is split in half. She sent this into Canon. I think it cost just over $500 to repair. But it turns out there's a number of people who have had this happen, and there's articles online you can look up. So there's an obvious weak point in this lens, and you need to be mindful of that it's not anywhere near as sturdy as your L series lenses, and it does have a tendency to snap in half if you do drop it or there's some sort of pressure there. So mine obviously haven't broken. You can let us know in the comments if yours has, but that was something that Canon could definitely improve. So the next thing, which is a bugbear of mine, it's on the 100 to 500 and it's on this lens. Canon have gone for this smooth, tight ring. And I don't really know what it's for. When it's at smooth, that's obviously the smoothest that it will extend. And if you go to tight, you can still extend it, but it's just a little bit harder to do. But I'm not sure who would be shooting at tight. Like, that would just be absolutely awful. The only reason I can think that is to stop the lens falling out itself. So when it's on tight, the lens doesn't actually fall out, but if we change it to smooth, it just starts to fall out on its own. However, some people have emailed me saying even when it's on tight, their lens is now falling out. And it's like, what's the purpose? This does not have any way to lock the barrel in place. Most lenses allow you to lock the lens. And funnily enough, even the small RF200-800 has a lock switch on the side. So Canon could have saved us space just by giving us a lock so you can lock the lens. And even the RF800-f11, this does extend, and then you can lock it in place and then it won't move. So very strange that Canon have gone with this design. I would much prefer just a lock, and then you can free up some real estate on the lens. And the reason I say that is the actual zoom ring on this lens is actually doubles as a zoom ring and a control ring, which is again not something that I'm particularly fond of. I would rather one of each, because you can't have them both at the same time. You've got to choose a manual focus, and because I like to use manual focus, the placement of it is quite a way back on the lens, so it can be tricky to use the manual focus ring and the zoom at the same time. I would have preferred perhaps to be bigger. Like you can see on the 100-500, the zoom ring is just much bigger, and it's just nicer to use. So I would much really prefer something like this. But again, these are just design choices that Canon have chosen. Not to my liking. Perhaps you like it. You can let me know in the comments. But again, just something I'm not a huge fan of. So the next major weakness of the lens is it's just slow. At f9 at 800mm means there's not that much light coming in, which leads to higher ISO and lower shutter speeds, and that can cause more noise obviously if you're in really low light environments. So you need to really question, where do I shoot the majority of the time? If you're shooting in rainforests, then you're probably going to struggle a little bit with this lens. However, for me, I obviously shoot in sunlight most of the time in Australia, and I don't have a massive issue. So it's going to vary from person to person. I just think you need to understand that we can definitely shoot at higher ISO now due to noise reduction, so it's not as big of an issue. This lens is a variable aperture lens, meaning it's not f9 all the time. If we shoot at those shorter focal lengths, we get more light. So I think at 200 to 267, it's 6.3. Then it goes 7.1, and then f8. It changes to f9 around 637 millimeters. So if you do shoot at the long end most of the time, you are stuck at f9. And when this becomes a major issue is often when the subject's a long way away and the light isn't that good. So for example, I had a brown tree creeper that was in a tree. It was a long way off at 800 millimeters. I've taken this shot, and when we zoom in, you can see it's just awful. There's no detail. It's just full of noise, and you might go, well, obviously that lens is no good. It's just a terrible lens. It's not very sharp. But if I was to shoot that same subject much closer and slightly better light, we end up with this shot. Same species, same lens. It's just our distance to the subject and the lights that's changed. So you just need to be aware, if you're cropping a lot in low light, you're not going to get very good images. It's just as simple as that. And just to show you a few examples of people that have shot at high ISO, the first shot was by Bill of this cardinal. I love this image. I think it's a very interesting image. And take a guess at what ISO he shot at. It was a storm. The light was terrible. He wasn't sure whether he should even go out and photograph this because it was so cold. He was so worried about the ISO, but he thought, I'll do it anyway because it's such a good scene. I'm glad you did. This was taken at ISO 12,800. And it's cleaned up extremely well with noise reduction, and I would be very happy to have that image. I love the ice on the branches, the color that complement the bird. So again, slow lens, but it's resulted in this image. The next image, which was taken in low light, was taken at ISO 8000 of a barred owl. I can't see too much wrong with this image, to be honest. The detail looks fine. I would again love to have this image. So it's kind of amazing how noise reduction works these days. It just allows us to shoot at much higher ISO. The next thing, it's not really a weakness of the lens, but when you start shooting with long lenses like 800mm, you have a tendency to shoot subjects that are much further away. The more distance from you to your subject, the more atmospheric conditions you get, which can lead to things like heat haze. And I've definitely noticed that with this lens. I'm seeing quite a bit of heat haze, and I'm confident many of you, some of your soft images are likely due to this, not to the lens, but just due to the air between you and the subject. So just think about the temperature of the water or the land and the air above. Are you seeing any waves? Are you seeing any issues? That could be what's going on. It's just that heat haze. So it's something you need to be aware of. It does impact nearly all of us in cold and hot environments. So just be aware, the closer we can get, the less that's going to impact us. So the other thing that Canon have not put on this lens to keep the cost down is the special coatings on some of the glass. What do I mean? The front element on, say, an L series lens and most other lenses has a special coating that makes it much easier to clean the front element. This one doesn't have it, which means it can be harder to get dust and grime off the front of your lens. The other thing is that this lens does have a tendency when shooting bright highlights to create a little bit of a ghosting around your subject. So because it's not L series, you are missing those elements. And when it comes to weather sealing, because it's an external zoom, I wouldn't be as confident with this lens in the rain as I would be with an L series lens. So a lot of people are using this in those conditions, but just be aware it's definitely not an L series lens. So if you're still watching this, you're probably going, with that many downsides, why would you want to buy this lens? And it's just because A, we don't really have any other options on Canon, but the benefits for me still outweigh those negatives. I can still capture really nice images. And I got an image like this crested turn, and we captured this action, and I couldn't be happier with this image. So it's one of those things, if you can get past the weaknesses, you will still get all those nice images. And Melanie mentions this in her comment she sent me. She said she went from the Canon 90D and Sigma 150-600. She moved to the R5, an amazing camera, wanted an RF lens. She's bought the 200-800, and she said, yes, it's heavy. Yes, the aperture isn't always the best, but when you get to know this lens in combination with your body, you learn what works best for you, and you can get some really great shots. For me, reach is everything, and I can see from her shot of this ruddy turnstone that the lens is working really well for her. All right, so based on all those strengths and weaknesses, should you buy this lens? Obviously, only you can make that decision, but it's important to understand what options are available for the RF mount in Canon. Like, what can we get to shoot wildlife? And there's probably 5 lenses that are in that sort of 3,000 and under bracket that I would potentially consider. The first one is the Canon RF200-800 f8. I've done a review of this lens. It's a very, very popular lens because it's so small, it's so light, it's remarkably sharp for the cost, and it's just very versatile that it's just so flexible to chuck in your bag. However, when we compare it to this lens, obviously 400mm is just a touch too short, especially say on a full frame body like an R6 or an R5, you're going to be cropping a lot. It's really too short for small birds. So if you're doing more butterflies, landscapes, and things like that, it's a great lens. We then go from this lens and we then consider the 100-500. This is an L series lens. It's a very sharp lens. It's actually a really quality lens. I love this lens. It's like a 100-400 on steroids. I've mentioned that numerous times. It's much lighter than the 200-800. It's slightly faster at f7.1. So overall, it's kind of a better in every way except for the reach. This lens maximum reach is 500mm, and again on a full frame like an R6 or an R5, it just has a tendency to feel a bit short. Yes, you can use a 1.4 converter. However, as you know, it has a restriction. You lose the 100-300 range, meaning it becomes a 420-700 f10, I think it is, which means you might as well just get this lens if you're shooting in that range all that time. So as a 100-500, absolutely fantastic. My opinion is this lens probably works really well on an APS-C body like the R7. It gives you that sort of 800mm full frame equivalent focal length. And hopefully with the R7 II just around the corner, I reckon the R7 II 100-500 could be that combo if you don't want the size and weight of this and you still want that 800mm full frame equivalent focal length. All right, next up is the 600 and 800mm f11 lenses. And I know a lot of people own these and really enjoy them, and I have enjoyed using this one. It excels at what it does well. That is, it's a light prime, it's sharp enough at 800mm, you just go out and you start shooting. The weaknesses is it's got a 6 meter minimum focus distance, it's f11 all the time, and you don't have that range of a zoom lens. But it is quite cheap. In fact, you could buy this 800 f11 and this 100-400 for less than the 200-800. So perhaps you could have both, entirely up to you, and just use which one you think you will be using in the field. For me personally, I think I will always just go with the 200-800 because it's just handy to have that extra range. But I know a lot of people, I've got a good friend that swears by this lens and he much prefers this over this. So it's definitely another option. Just be aware on the older RF bodies, you didn't get the full AF area on the sensor. The modern cameras like the R6 II, the R5 II, etc. do, but on the older bodies, you didn't. So just something to be aware of with those lenses. So you might be asking, well, Duade, what lens do you reach for when you're going out into the field? For me, I'm grabbing the 200-800. Even though it has all those weaknesses, it's just the versatility that appeals to me. Being able to go from 200-800 means I'm not going to miss shots, means I can change my composition. It's not too heavy for me. It's sharp enough, so therefore I'm going to use it. If Canon had a better option, if we had a internal zoom lens like L series with more reach, then I would more than likely use that. But at the moment, this is what we have. So this is the lens that I'm using, and I'm suggesting many of you would be exactly the same. I would love to hear in the comments, what lens have you gone with? Why have you gone with? Is there anything I've forgot to mention today? What's your experience been like with the 200-800? And again, I want to thank everyone who submitted images. I think it was 160 odd images I had to go through. I'm going to share more of those at the end of this video, so be sure to watch those. Again, I want to thank every single person who supports my channel through giving me the thumbs up, subscribing, my members that support me directly through a small payment every month. I wouldn't have this channel without you, and I sincerely apologize that I don't get out more videos. Like, it takes me a while to get videos out now, and many of you are probably wondering why that is. I don't want to go into too many details, but I am a full-time carer for somebody who I love. So my priorities are my loved one, and I still will create videos. I just need you to be patient with me. It just takes me a little bit longer. I'm still going to be creating videos, but I just cannot keep up and do one video a week or anything like that. So I appreciate the support. I'm not going anywhere. It's just going to take me a little bit longer, and I do really, really appreciate the support. So until the next video, happy birding, take care, and see you later.